Good morning, everybody. A little earlier version of Chats with Coach Doug, and I thank you for tuning in. This is a joy and a treat for me. I have probably one of the bigger influences in my coaching career joining us this morning, the one and only John Godwin from US Kids Golf. Thank you, John. Good morning.
Good morning, Doug. What's the temperature in Toronto this morning?
It is a balmy 40 degrees. So Fahrenheit, not too warm. It's warming. It's trending. Next week looks a lot warmer. It hasn't been, it's been dry this spring, but it hasn't been exactly warm. So it's kind of like golf would be kind of hit and miss right now anyways, even though we're all on lockdown still. And it's kind of just, we're all sitting on the edge of our seats because tomorrow our premier, who's kind of like the governor, he is going to announce what services are now open for business. And everybody is thinking that he's going to open golf courses. So the great thing about that is there's going to be a mad rush. I mean, like you said, you were telling me how you heard the golf courses that are open in your Atlanta area are like just packed. And it's kind of like that in British Columbia. I was talking to a director of golf, and she is at a private club, and they're actually over balloted for spots. So like their membership is over balloting. They don't have enough tee times to accommodate everybody on these ballots. So it's a really interesting point, because I think, as you and I were just talking before we got on here, is golf could be in a position where it is the salvation for a lot of athletes. What do you think?
Oh, it is, because really, golf is it's a long walk, out in the beautiful countryside. Golf is safe if it's done correctly. We truly believe that if it's done correctly in your distance, everyone can enjoy this game. If we get this from golf, we're all doomed.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I really think that it's just getting through the protocols of understanding what is the new norm, right? What does it look like? And how do people stay, socially distanced, and it's just a period of adjustment. It's taking what you would think, where you roll up to the club, you hang out with, a couple of members, you go down to the lounge, you maybe have a coffee, you read the paper, you talk to some people, where now it's okay. You can show up about 15 minutes ahead of time before your tee time. You check in. Maybe there's 2 mats to warm up at, right? But you're only allowed on that if your tee time is, within the 10-minute allotment. And then you go play, and your tee times are spaced out, and then you're only allowed 5 minutes in the parking lot. So, I mean, it's right now until, things change. I mean,
that's right.
One of the things
it really, Doug, I'm thinking golfers, they miss golf, but you know what? They miss being with their friends. They're missing people. So if you've got a buddy you haven't seen in a while, and you both play, and you'd like to get out and have a conversation and take a walk, I mean, what a great way to you can see your buddies and stay safe. So let's get after it.
That's a great point. That's a really good point. James Hong and I were talking, and great junior coach, and we were talking about how he was asking me some questions about juniors, and how he was finding they were getting a little bit anxious, and their patience was a little short on these Zoom calls, and we were really discussing the fact that it's the in-person relationship with your coach that really is a distraction for them away from anything that may be troubling them or giving them a hardship during their this time. And so where a video is good because we see each other, the physical being around somebody, it really does, I think take a big chunk of that worry away, because it's a distraction. And we're really hopeful that, coaching and teaching and playing becomes a lot better as we keep moving through this, because there are great ideas out there and people to allow us to, like you said, if we get this from golf, I think we're all doomed, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. All right. So a little bit of history, people. This gentleman right here, John Godwin, is pretty much a rock star in our junior golf world. He is director of player development for US Kids Golf. John and I met in 2011 when him and John Bryan came up and did a certification at Eagles Nest Golf Club. John's a master professional in the Georgia PGA section. He's also the former past president of the Georgia PGA. I mean, I'm going to list off a whole bunch of stuff here. He's the pro emeritus at Godwin Creek Golf Club that his father built and he took over. And now, because of his role with U.S. Kids, he's the pro emeritus. He's also been a contributor to the PGA in so many different ways in building junior golf, as well as player of the year, teacher of the year, and junior golf leader, both recognized by the PGA and his section. Graduate of Florida State University, which makes the third, I don't know, what is this FSU content, connection, but third Florida State person that's come on. Allison Kurt, Ann Carroll, and now the legend Don Godwin. He's played.
Go Noles.
Pardon?
Go Noles.
Go Noles. Yes, exactly. Do I have to do this?
Right? Yeah, please.
Right. I got a couple of Buckeye friends that might not like that. You played in 2 PGA championships, 2 senior PGA championships, and also 1 senior U.S. Open. And I mean, to do that is just amazing. And it's obviously, playing golf was such a large part of your life, originally, right? And as you came up through, playing and wanting to play this game at a high level, you moved into teaching and coaching, and we'll get into that little story a little bit more. But you've been doing this role for a while now, and one of the things I wanted to ask you right off the hop is there are so many wonderful junior coaches that you've come across this world, and they have some traits that I think parents should listen to and understand when they're looking for a coach. Why U.S. Kids, trained coaches are some of the best in the business, but also what are these traits that you see permeate from the best of the best? What are some of those things?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's really a specialized thing in coaching in the junior world, isn't it? I mean, you've got to have tons of patience. You've got to be enthusiastic. Kids can spot if you're mailing it in, they spot it right away. That you can't pull anything off on them. They know if you're engaged or not, and it takes a special, I think, approach to all of this. You've got to be a mentor. You've got to talk with parents. You've got to get everybody on board. You're the Pied Piper out there doing it, and at the same time teaching this game. So, kids really don't have their cognitive skill developed until later. So in their journey early on, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, that they're just trying golf, and the coach has to have a skill set that's that he is running a business. I always talk about it sort of a vertical business at the club where you are the junior segment of it, but you've got to have a skill set that's balancing the business side with the fun side, with the energy required, and Nicole Weller always says use 5 words or less when you're describing, technique. And so it's a very unique skill set to go from a good coach to a great coach. And it's in identifying them, a lot of the best coaches toil and do their work, and no one's really outside of their local or city or state section. No one's ever heard of them. They probably won't make the top 100 list, but they certainly would make the top of a U.S. Kids list.
That's some great stuff. I mean, you mentioned a couple of really interesting points that sometimes the best aren't even heard of. And I mean, social media has definitely allowed me to become a lot more known across the continent of junior golf. And there are some that I know. And I mean, I had a young lady on last night who is just an absolute joy. And the really interesting thing that I loved about talking and listening to her talk was the passion and the smiles and what her intent is doing. And it's really interesting because there's a lot of junior coaches like that here in Ontario as well, across Canada and across the US, that, they are doing an amazing job. And it's so true. They really have to have the patience and the understanding. I think one of the things that separates a junior coach from just a regular one is relevancy. Now, when I say relevancy, you have to have an understanding about who's standing in front of you. You have to understand what the age group is, and you also have to be able to adapt your style of approach. how are you going to interact with them? You know, it's never an authoritative kind of way. It's, you know, get down to their level and really make sure that they understand, because I mean, I'm 6'3", you know, you get a 7-year-old who's constantly doing this and looking up, and it's such a threatening position. So to get down to their level is super important, and then understand where they're coming from. Some of the things that these kids interact with and how you can be creative in that way, I think are some of the real separators. And it's really cool, given a platform to do that. And it really starts with having programming that gives you the opportunity to have these kids in front of you. You can be a great junior coach, you can love kids and all that stuff, but you need a good baseline, right? And that's kind of where.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Think about this. Kids, they're professional learners. They go to school every day. All right. So they're attentive from the get-go, from jump. They're going to pay attention. And boy, if you don't get it within the first 2 or 3 minutes, they start to think, oh, this coach doesn't have it, or they do. So you engage them quickly, you know, and I think the best coaches do that. They engage the student because they know they are a professional learner. They're doing it every day. Whereas we get older, and you know, I think that was the one thing I noticed, the difference between coaching kids and adults. The adult mind seemed, you might be on ABC and they wanted XYZ. They wanted the whole thing in one kit and caboodle, if you will. The kids will kind of more stay in the present. They'll kind of go with you and go with you. I think you can build you know, your blocks a little bit easier if you're tuned in to that and have the skill to put the blocks together.
Oh, that's a great comment. I mean, I really do believe it. Oh, by the way, don't know if you saw, but I've got my US Kid Tournament bib on today in honor of you know, Coach.
I'm liking it. You ought to be in the background there. That's Pinehurst #2, the 18th hole. I think that's.
Oh yeah, that's your for you. I thought I also got the old Masters putter head cover here, which I'm looking forward to hearing that story. That people are going to want to hear that one. That's a really cool place. 2011, you and John Bryan came up to Eagles Nest. Henry Brunton had you guys come up and do a US Kids certification. Probably the biggest tipping point in my life. I'm sitting there because I wanted more information, and listening to you guys, and more importantly yourself. Your one line that you said, you were out there talking about how you ended up coaching kids, and you said, you know, I made a decision to stop coaching adults, and I went home, prayed about it, talked about it. You know, it really, really, really made me realize, actually, you know what? Sorry, it was 2013, I think it was. And I really remember listening to you talk about how you went home and thought about it, and then made the decision to not teach adults. And you said, you know what, you may not trust yourself at first, but you will see the fruits of this decision down the road. I sat there for a minute and I thought about it. And then the next week I called you and we talked for about an hour and a half. And it was probably one of the most poignant conversations for me, and a tipping point. And, you know, I've always referenced that with you, because it was such a really big part for me to make that decision to just teach kids. And I've never looked back. What was the big tipping point for you in your coaching life that, you know, made you decide that maybe, okay, I still love to play, but you know what, teaching and coaching is really where I want to live and breathe. What was that tipping point for you?
Well, you know, it's in this coaching journey that we all have, you know, there are numerous tipping points, if you will. It's sort of like as you're looking through what you're doing, was kept going back to, like, you know, what's really my purpose of coaching here? And it got real obvious that my energy level went way up when I knew the juniors were showing up at 4 o'clock. When I was giving the adult lessons, I was watching the clock, and that bugged me. I was just thinking, gosh, you know, I'm just, I think I might have told you, it was like giving haircuts, you know, next. And so I'd lost my passion. I'd lost my edge. And I thought, well, I'm not very good anymore. This is, I've got to make a decision here. So I just sort of followed my heart. I listened, like you told you, I prayed about it. And so what is it that, what is it that's, what's really my purpose here as I'm going forward. I was, in my 40s and thinking, I guess it was kind of the midlife crisis, and, again, another tipping point, because as we go along our journey, we're always on that, trying to cross one creek to the next or get back on a nice smooth road. And so for me, it just made sense what to do. My peers thought I was crazy. And because back, that was 1999, Doug, that was 21 years ago. And and it was just right after that I'd made that decision. I met Dan Van Horn, and it was off to the races. His nickname's the Greyhound, by the way, because that guy, he can move forward. He's one of the most incredible individuals I've ever met, and I've been very, very lucky to be by his side.
Well, you mentioned the point of the haircuts, and I really like that, because I honestly think, and so many people over the last 5 weeks have mentioned, if you are passionate and love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And it's very interesting that you were in your 40s. I was in my 40s when this happened. And it's really been, I wouldn't say it was much for me as a midlife crisis. It was just an interesting pathway change. So it's like I'm standing there, fork in the road, and it really was a great decision, because it's opened up so many different things. And I've met so many amazing people in this, and I have such great friends because of this, who are all U.S. kids coaches at the same time. Justin Blazer, Michelle Holmes, just to name, James Hong, just names a few. And it's the really cool thing about this is, one of the things is we're inspiring the future. And to do that, you really need a good structure. And one of the things that I really loved about taking this certification, I'm not doing a plug here for US Kids, but one of the things that and don't get me wrong, we here in Canada are leaders with our long-term player development programs. We have Future Links. We have a great program. What I liked about US Kids was how it helped me segment and instantly give some validity and the child something to go by. The levels 1, 2, and 3 that you had were so simple and easy to follow that this was what you developed. How long did it take you, and how many revisions did you have to go through before you really had these 3 levels?
Oh, gosh. Well, it was Dan Van Horn and I and Rob Tipton. We were the creators of this, and Dan and I and Rob would get in a room, and I can't tell you how many iterations that it was, and it was exhausting, to be honest with you. We didn't think we were ever going to get it out the door. And that's, it's what I always joke with John Bryan. I say, what do we put in and what do we leave out? And to try to keep it simple and come up with some terms. I mean, it wasn't easy. Albert Einstein said, and you've heard me say this, if you can't explain your material in 2 or 3 sentences, you don't know your material well enough. And so to try to get simple, it's easy to say, keep it simple, but when you're the one that's having to put it out there, it was hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And then that got out, and then now our team with John Bryan and Nicole and Jim Hardy and Dan, all of us, we've pushed it forward now to we've included all the way up to 10 levels now. So it's always evolving.
That was my next point.
It never stays the same.
Right. I mean, now you've got expansions into 4 to 10. You've also revised 1 to 3, which I really liked, because I think you guys took out a few things that weren't pertinent and also made it a little bit more measurable. One of the things I really find is it's almost like juniors, and I'll use it this way. The levels are evolving similar to how the juniors are evolving, because so many more now with golf being so prevalent and a sport that we can play safely, I really think the onus on learning how to play this game in a fun, imaginative way. So you guys have the booklets, but you also have the wonderful game guide. And, Don Law was a great resource for you guys for this game guide. And I mean, I've used the game guide, but I've also created so many of my own that it's just a great template. And it gives you, I mean, you could have kids play cow pasture pool, and any coaches watching this will attest. Cow pasture pool, probably the best game in the world ever created. and kids will play that literally till the cows come home. So it's such a segment. I mean, in a molding of all these things. So now you've got levels 4 to 10, and you also have now got a little bit of an app. You've got an app to help track all this stuff. Are levels 4 to 10 something you guys are continuously working on, or are you kind of happy where they are right now?
Oh yeah, it's always a work in process. And one good thing about the app now, as we go more digital, you know, some of the changes we can make it, we can do it sort of right on the fly and instantaneous if we wanted to change some of the skills or forms. But you know, it's you know, we had to discuss, you know, the sort of the journey that the kids have. You know, that they start at trial stage, they're just trying golf, and so as you know, if it's not fun, they're out.
Mhm.
And so just make it fun and play the games, and then there'll be sort of every young player makes their own decision to whether they're going to get into the sport more and more, and maybe get more to the committed stage, and that happens at various ages. It's just individualistic is when they decide to do that. So you know, we try to raise the bar a little bit, if you will, at each of the levels, trying to match challenge with skill,
Mhm.
and so that it's within reach, but it's a little bit of a push. So as we go forward, I'd like your feedback as well to see if we're on the mark or not. It's a collaborative effort of everyone that as we go forward. And you know, really, I think one of the great things about, you know, our curriculum, um, having been involved with it so much, is that it allows the coach to use his own words. You've got to come up with your own 5 words. You've got to use some of our vernacular, you know, like hot dog in the bun or stick to finish, you know, some of the fun stuff, but you've got to teach the grip. You know, if this was a grip seminar, we'd have to agree to disagree at the end of the day. I mean, we as golf professionals, we might not agree on a grip, but so the beauty of this is you teach the grip as you understand it, know it, and like it, and in any of the other parts. So it's not a methodology. It's a way to get the kids in there, and then you go coach them.
Well, that's a great point. And one of the things I've often said, it's just a great template to use, a baseline to, you know, because when you're in the lesson and how you're communicating with the kid, that's where you shine as the coach. You really are giving the coach the opportunity to take some information and put their spin on it, explain it to them how they are. And you know what? There's been so many different, I would say, different ways to do it that so many coaches, you know, some stick to the way that it says in the book, some do it in a different way, some create songs, some do all kinds of different things, right? And it's a really great way to see the creativity of junior coaches. And again, it's a great template. And I know that as these levels 4 to 10, they move into a bit more into the player side of things. One of the things I love about US Kids and yourself and this player development stuff is it's really 3 major silos, right? We've got the products, we've got the coaching and the training, and then we also have the tournaments. And really that is something that I think is really neat. One of those things that I think you guys have just done a wonderful thing, because I've seen it since its inception, was US Kids invested in Longleaf Family and Golf and Family Club in Pinehurst, North Carolina, as the center for your junior development programming. So you can bring in professionals from across the world, train at this center, understand how the business model is done, all the successes, talk about the T system and how you guys have developed that, which is absolutely amazing. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But I really think that you guys started off great with Jim Hardy. He's a great man, a great passionate coach, and someone who has helped you guys roll out the program, because when maybe one of you can't go and do it, he can go do the certification. Now you've added a rock star in my friend Nicole Weller. Nicole, coming from, you know, just in Savannah and moving to making that decision after being at her club for so long and establishing herself in the Savannah area as a wonderful junior golf coach and on the development side. Where do you guys see, and the really cool part is her husband came with, and he's now the GM at the club. So, I mean, you guys really have stole and got, you know, a great team there. Where do you see Nicoles' expertise helping US Kids at Longleaf?
Oh, well, you summed it up there. I mean, she is a rock star, both of them. They just have you know, a deep commitment to youth golf, and Nicole, it's her passion. And you know, she's got a master's degree in sports psychology from Wake Forest, so she has a level of understanding. Yeah, the Deacons. she has a level of understanding that's um, very deep, and she's a great communicator. She's gonna help us in so many ways, and already has. So I mean, I'm thrilled to be able to pick her brain. I've already started picking her brain a little bit to kind of improve my 5 words or less.
Well, I tell you, she's got lots of information. I mean, one of the things she created was the little golf train. That was a really cool, young person programming. But the really cool thing is having another brain like Jim Hardy, but from a different aspect even, is just going to keep growing the development programming at Longleaf. And the really cool thing I like about this is it's like, hey, let's test it. Let's put it into place. And you can do it right there. And then you can track all the data and go, oh, that didn't really work. Okay, let's try something else. So it's really like Dan described, it's like a living, breathing project, and it's always shifting. I mean, one of the coolest things was, and I think this is where I think golf can be brought out to the masses in a better, quicker way because time is so different, is the 6-hole golf course that you guys have at Longleaf. And you've played it. What was
bottle brush.
Exactly.
It's a, for you to go out there and, 30 minutes and play the course, and it's a great way to introduce kids to the game where they can learn to play the game, not a game, the game. And I think we as coaches sometimes we get stuck in the X's and O's of maybe the swing and because our brains are kind of wired to that. But teaching a kid to play the game is important. One time I was coaching Rudy Duran, Tiger's first coach, obviously,
Yeah.
And in front of some kids, I said, now kids, golf is hard. And at the end of the class, Rudy pulled me aside and he said, John, why'd you tell them that? I said, well, Rudy, it is hard. He said, no, it's not. It's a ball and stick game. You got a stick, you hit the ball, count the strokes. What's hard about that? And I said, well, it's hard to be good. And he said, well, yeah, but that's not the goal here. Of course it's hard to be good. And that in of itself changed me. And he said, start to be a game coach, if you will. Rudy he's one of the gentlest, greatest guys I've ever met. I probably hold Rudy Duran as high esteem of any coach I've ever been around. And
that's pretty cool.
Let's teach him to play the game. And, he did a pretty good job with Tiger.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. That guy won a few. Yeah, he's not too shabby, right? And that's a really good point. Golf is hard. I mean, but it really is a stick and ball game. And I saw this one coach I know up here. He says, I'm a rotary movement specialist or something to that effect, right? Like it was just some crazy title that he put on his Instagram that I thought was like, that's interesting because it didn't have any mention about golf, right? It's like, it's all about like turning and removing and circular. I think it's really, that's a really good way to put it. It's a stick and ball game that we're trying to make these kids have a great time. I often say, you don't really get in trouble on a golf course if you're out on a golf course because it teaches you so many different lessons, right? And so many life lessons can be done on a golf course where you're not hanging out at the mall or in front of a video game. And I really do think that this is the lessons that we've learned are pretty amazing. So I want you to tell a little story that you relayed to me last year. Was you spent I can't remember how long you spent there, but you spent some time in Jackson's Hole, Wyoming, coaching. And this was down around 1992. And you had an amazing adventure that came out of nowhere with this retired executive from Wall Street. And I'd love to, can you tell us the story about how it transformed into like one of the most unbelievable weeks of your life?
Yeah, so I'm coaching out in Jackson Hole at Teton Pines, an Arnold Palmer designed course, and met this gentleman, and he actually had a summer ranch in Pinedale, Wyoming. It was about 70 miles away, but he would drive to the golf course almost daily. He and I played golf, and I'd give him a lesson in the playing lesson. I mean, he was my number one customer. He kept me employed all season. It was great. And so, at the end of the summer, he said, well, John, we should play Augusta National together. And it kind of hit me like, okay, well, maybe he doesn't understand how this kind of works. And I said, well, I'd love to play Augusta National with you, but it's a very private course, and I don't really know any members, and if I did, it wouldn't be really appropriate to ask. So I'm sorry, I can't help you. We're not going to be able to play there. And he said, well, I'm a member, and I don't know what it just hit me like, oh my goodness. And so I called BS on him right out loud. I said, BS. And he started laughing uncontrollably. I mean, he was almost on the ground. And he said, no, I am a member, and I'd love for you to come play with me. So I was shocked. And so he invited me down. I stayed at the Butler cabin. You go in the Butler cabin, the first room on the left, that was my room. And every day I played the par 3, and he brought in guests. We played 36 holes. And so it was, see, that's one of those things about golf. It just comes out of nowhere, this wonderful journey that just happens to you.
You got a week that people dream of. I mean, 10 days at the Butler cabin, and like you told me, like by the third or fourth day, you'd walk back in, and like the attendant would say to you, "Oh, Mr. Godwin, what would you like to eat today?" And they would make you your dinner. And like, what do you got on the menu today? Well, we got some fish. Oh, I'd love fish. And like they, it was like you were an employee by the end of the first week, and it was like it must have been unbelievably surreal that you're sitting there for 10 days getting to play golf every day in Mecca.
And the best part about it, Doug, the last day that I was there, one of the guests that he had to come in couldn't make it, and he said, "Well, John, would you like to invite a guest?" And I said, "I'd like to invite my dad."
Oh, amazing.
And my dad was elderly at the time, and I wasn't sure he could make the drive, and his health was failing. And Dad said, "I'll be there." And I said, "Well, I'll come get you." He said, "No, I can make it." So my dad drove over, and I played Augusta National with my dad. It's one of these things in life that, I mean, I will never forget. I kind of get choked up even.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, that's an amazing story. And these are the things and the amazing stuff that golf gives us. I mean, I lamented a little, I talked about a little bit earlier about the people that I've met in my life. And I mean, easily Justin Blazer is one of my very closest friends. And I met him through this and junior golf. And I mean, it's really these wonderful ties that you have and these memories that you get because of this wonderful game. And it's that story. Thank you for sharing that story. I love that story. So that's why I wanted everybody else to hear it. So, you've traveled across the world. You've been to all kinds of different places, played golf in some amazing spots. Right now, I get to ask you 5 questions that are kind of a surprise to you. Don't worry, they're all really easy, but you have to give me some idea about what they are and how you can best answer them. All right. So the number 1, if you had your choice, you have a choice of steak, fish, chicken, ribs, sushi, or pasta. What would be your preference?
Oh, God, I love them all. I'm going to go pasta.
Pasta. So when you went to Italy and went to the Italian Open, was that like a food explosion, like unbelievable to yourself?
Oh yeah, they know how to do it, believe me.
Cool. Well, I hope that gets back on sooner than later in Italy as well. All right, finish this sentence. I learned that when you play golf with Greg Norman in the Aussie Open, you should not.
Oh gosh. Oh my goodness. That's a great story. Well, don't challenge him, because the guy can eat nails.
That is a great story. If we have time at the end, I want to come back to that. Okay. So who would you like to face in a Shell's Wonderful World of Golf match, and where would you like to play them?
I'd like to play with Billy Casper, and I'd like to play Royal Melbourne.
Amazing.
The composite course. I think Billy Casper, not many people really got to know Billy and, on the public side of things, but Billy Casper was one of the greatest men that I've ever met. And I was lucky to be a coach at the Junior Ryder Cup Academy, where we had a Ryder Cup captain, former captain, and a player, and we had Billy Casper. And what a great guy! I wish I could have spent more time with him and learned how to hit that big old swinging hook every time.
Yeah, really. I mean, that was the thing, that just the rope-a-dope, like it could cut through the wind. It could, man, he knew how to move that ball, and that's one of the things I'm amazed at, just back in that time, how much the ball was worked and how they were able to move it all over the place and make it dance and do all these different things.
How about that putting stroke?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
so yeah, Billy Casper,
that's amazing. All right, so I've thought up some titles for the John Godwin book, and so I'm going to read off the hey, you know what, so I want you to tell me what you think is the best title to describe the John Godwin book. Okay, ready? All right. Easy like a Sunday morning. Fade it unless you need to turn it. Take a walk with me. Fairways, smiles, birdies, and joy. How golf shaped my life. And lastly, I got Georgia on my mind.
Fade it unless you have to turn it.
Love it. Love it. I was wondering if you were going to say that. I like that one too.
But you know what my real title will be?
What?
The Other Side of the Ball.
Ooh. See, I like that. That's a good one.
See, you can go anywhere with that.
This is true, because I stand on the other side of the ball, being a lefty, right? Okay, my last question. All right. What did Dan Van Horn do by creating U.S. Kids?
Oh my gosh. You'll have to ask him that. But from where I sit, it opened everything up. It allowed youth to get into the game, because there was no equipment really. I mean, he went into a store to buy some clubs for his kids, and can you imagine back in the mid to late 90s, there were no specifically built, designed clubs for kids. So he saw it as an opportunity, and he seized it. He's an entrepreneur. It took a lot of courage, and he launched it, and he's a visionary, and made it work. It's really, I think in many ways it has allowed so many more youth to get into the game, because they have clubs that fit and opportunities to play.
Well, I honestly and truly can't say that. I can't agree with you more. I honestly think that he changed the golfing landscape. I think U.S. Kids is one of the most important golf companies on the planet, and I honestly and truly believe that he changed lives by creating U.S. Kids Golf. And I know that people watching this would attest to that, as well as yourself. And it's amazing how one man, has an idea and can affect so many different people across this globe. And people don't really understand that just how much so. And it's thank you for your answer, because it was very, very good one. All right. A little bit of a nice fun question here for you. All right. So one of the things that you travel all over the place. All right. But when you come back home and you walk in the door, you could have had the crappiest day. You could have had a good day, whatever. It doesn't matter. There's someone waiting for you right there, and they take it all away. And you said that she's with you right. She's with you right now. Your beagle is a pretty special person to you, right? As my dog George is. What is it about a dog that when you're traveling, you can walk in the door and it's like it takes all that, everything else just throws it out the door, and they just don't care. They just love you to death. What is that feeling?
Oh yes, it's immediate. Oh, you're back, and there, it's. I have a beagle, and they always say, David Faraday said, a beagle is the most loyal dog in the world, and mine is, I'm gone a lot, and she doesn't hold it against me, and I get back, and it's fun to run and play, and so yeah, it's got a little routine, and it's like 25 pounds of joy.
No kidding. I mean, that was one of the things. I mean, my wife told me that dogs have about a 70-second memory where if you're gone for more than 70 seconds, it's like all brand new all over again. I was like, it's Groundhog Day. Boom. But I really do thank you for sharing that. And I mean, it was more like just how we cope with having, you know, we come back after a long trip or you know, you've been away all day and you walk in that door and having a pet to just make you feel so much more joy and forget about some of the, if you've had that bad or stressful day. And it's been a really interesting point because during this time, they're the constant, right? I mean, my dog looks at me and he's like, oh, play. And I don't know what's going to happen to him. He might go into withdrawal when I go back to work.
Yeah, you know, they got to be thinking like, well, what's up? How come all the humans are with us now?
Exactly. I saw a few pictures when this first started where dogs exhausted on the like on the ground saying, I'm not going out for my 5th walk today, or like the dog's up
Yeah.
at the top of the cupboards, I'm not going for another walk, number 7, right? It's so funny. So here's an interesting question. We are and US Kids is more global than ever. But how do you think we as junior golf coaches can take this to every single corner of the earth? What can we continuously do to help grow this game?
Well, you know, it's already there. Golf is it's a global game. It does exist in almost every country, really. It's probably, you know, you have certain places more than others. There's more access, but it's there. And I think at the end of the day, it just boils down to who's there to deliver it and what skills do they have. And so it you know, for us, I always say, you know, golf professionals, coaches, we're the gatekeepers. You know, so we sort of have the key to the golf kingdom. You know, open the door and come in, and then what's the experience like when you walk through the gate to play? And it's, you know, if it's welcoming, and if it's welcoming for young and old, ages 8 to 88, it's something that all of us have to realize that we're providing, you know, the opportunity for the experience on the ground. So, and what is that? So it's there. It's just got to be delivered.
Well, one of the things that I find very interesting is it's always the fight of accessibility to a golf course, because people always think, hey, I've got private clubs, you've got, you know, public clubs. The public clubs want to get that green fee because they want to get, you know, those players out on the golf course. The private club want the memberships because they don't, you know, they want to make sure they've got those guys paying full pop and all that stuff. When in reality, a coach with a very well structured junior program can bring so much different, more value to an operation. And the really interesting thing, and it doesn't have to be 18 holes. It can be 9, it could be 6, it could be 3. But the main thing here is the lack of understanding is still very evident in clubs that don't realize how having more juniors will increase their bottom line. What strategies can we continuously do to help these people realize that junior golf is actually their salvation?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I've always called as the blue star customer. So imagine that you could put sew a blue star onto a new customer sleeve. Like, okay, they're coming to golf because of you. They learn to play. They were a new customer, and then all of a sudden they go in the shop and they buy a shirt, they buy a cap, they rent a cart, they buy a greens fee, they buy a set of clubs, and lo and behold, they join the club. Well, that's the reason they did that was because of their entry into the game. Sort of like if you go into a restaurant and you're greeted by the maitre d' and you're, you know, it's the dining experience. And if all of that is good, the food, and then if the food's good, it's a home run. But the food doesn't even have to be that great. They like to go because it's kind of the overall experience. So the blue star customer out there is alive and well. And I think our coaches a lot of time, I know I didn't go to what I call the decision maker, your boss or the committee or the general manager, and sort of lay the groundwork of that part of it. You know, who this blue star is. You want to be a fire starter, and can you track it? And because really, Doug, at the end of the day, that if that decision maker doesn't see your value, the only way they'll ever really know it is when you leave. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that guy did that. And then it's over.
Well, it is, and in actual fact, you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head. It's true. They don't realize how good it is until they're gone, and it's one of those things that you sit there and think, well, you really think that this is more about, like, it's all about me, where I'm actually more doing it for the club and for these kids to love this game, because they only look at, oh, maybe you're stealing too much of my thunder, or you're too popular, or, oh, really, are we really seeing the value from this? Well, actually, if you look at it, yes, you are seeing the value, but they can't seem to really think and get out of their own way to see the bigger picture, and it becomes very narrow-minded. And the problem is golf is such a global sport, and financially, like, especially with this crazy time that we're having now, you want to be able to have opportunities when you open those doors, that these members still feel like their kids cannot have opportunities, and or people that are going to come to a public golf course can have opportunities to get their kid into this game, because it's really, honestly and truly, a game that is going to be, like we just talked about at the start of this, it's a game you can play. They're not playing baseball. They're not playing soccer. They're not playing hockey, basketball, football, golf
Yeah, because
course.
see, all those sports go away as soon as you get to, and you're in high school. Because if you're not very good, you're not really going to, pursue the other sports. So all the studies show that if you come to golf as a kid and play for a while, and maybe you don't play in college, but the studies show that you come back to golf. So it's sort of the facilities that take a longer view of this. It's sort of like investing, in the stock market or your investments. You take a long-term view. The returns come back, but you make the investment, then you just park it and leave it,
Right.
nurture it, grow it, add
Yep.
to it, and then it comes back. So facilities have short-term needs, they have long-term goals. The best clubs will, and you know which ones they are. They take the long view, and they incorporate youth golf, junior golf into their program. They're very successful.
So this is a really interesting point. I actually mentioned this to a woman I was speaking with last week. No, actually, I think it was Susie Whaley. That I believe this study was done by the Society of Club Managers in the States, and it basically stated you can see the health of a private golf club based on how many junior girls are members. Because if the junior girls are members, typically the mom is going to be a member as well, and she's going to be participating in other things. So you have more of a family environment. When you have a boy and that the mom drops the boy off because the boy wants to be independent, leaves him, the mom isn't necessarily going to join the golf club. So it's a very interesting point, because getting more girls into golf is a great thing. Having great programming to do that is even better. Some of our closest colleagues that you and I have are doing a lion's share job of getting people into getting girls into this game to play it. LPGA with their girls golf program and all that stuff, it's fantastic. The more girls, the better. So this is where it just I honestly and truly feel like I'm banging my head against the wall when it's sitting right in front of us, and it's low hanging fruit, man. You guys these clubs are sitting there dying for members, but they're not realizing that the actual key to their success is hanging right in front of them. They just don't want to take the bite, because they only thinking short term. They're not thinking long term.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, because if a parent plays, there's a 1 in 4 chance that their kid's going to play. If the parent doesn't play, it's a 1 in 250 chance. So, yeah, it's and here's another kind of interesting point. If you ask a golf professional at a course, how many members, if it's a private, how many members do you have? They'll have the number. They'll say 412.
Right.
Know the number, but the next question, if you ask, well, how many kids out of that are age 12 and under? I don't really have that number. It's a ton.
Sure.
So, for a program to be, 40, 60, 100 kids, that's fairly easy to do. So anyway, it's something that's it's out there. That's why I say it's the gatekeepers, we need to polish the gate and open it up.
Totally. And I love the fact that US Kids is doing some training for professionals who want to go to Longleaf and learn how to use the business model to increase their reach, and because it works. The numbers are there. And one of the things you guys came up with, and I wrote about it last year, is are you playing the right set of tees? And your tee for your tee system is amazing based on how far you carry your driver and your 7-iron. And the really cool part is you guys used it as a study at Longleaf based on how these people were on the range from this certain spot, how far they flew their driver, was the tee that they should play. What was interesting was rounds went from over 4 hours to under 4 hours, and you guys and people's handicaps went down.
And yeah, and the enjoyment of the game went up. See, I mean, we've really kind of inherited in our game, inherited sort of the old tired tee model, right? I mean, you have the back tees, back in the day we say the back tees, the middle tees, the men's tees, the ladies' tees, and it never really made the jump, if you will, for youth, and that's really how this kind of developed. Dan had all the data points that collected from TrackMan over the years, and he's the father of this yardage model, and figured it out, and then was able to really come up with the math works. And if you stand up on the tee, Doug, from the back tees and hit driver wedge, well then Laura playing up at the level 1 tee, she should hit driver wedge as well. So it's all sort of the same. So that's a glaring glimpse of the obvious, but it's going to take a while, I think, where golfers are pretty conservative in their approach and hesitant to change. So it'll take a while, but it's a new movement, and it's gaining traction. And we certainly, I mean, I can't imagine as a youth coach not having a short course for the kids to play,
Right.
because with every course in the world, there's a short course within it. It just hasn't been identified.
Right, absolutely. And the really cool thing is, we put out a set of green tees last year, and what was really great about that is one of my young guys, he played it. It was rated. He got a handicap. I mean, he shot his lowest score ever, shot 78. It was his opportunity. He could go out and play the course from a set of tees and not hold up the golf course. And it's really funny because I tried to get a grandparent and his grandkids to play those tees and say, hey, when you make pars, now you can move back, right? It was, so they teed off on those first tees. By the time I got them to the third tee, they had moved back 2 tee decks, only because the boys felt that they were too old to be playing the forward tees. Not because their ability wasn't anywhere close to it, but they just felt, oh, no, they should be playing a 2D tees back. And that's the problem, because our mentality is, oh, we start forward, we move back. Once we get back, oh, we don't move forward. That's taking our ego a shot, right? And, oh, we should be playing back here because I hit it that far. Well, no, do you hit it consistently enough that far? So you're still making 8s and 9s, but you'd rather do that from back there instead of making a 4 or a 5. It's mind-boggling.
Oh yeah, I mean and for complete game development, when I first started playing the ladies tees or the red tees, I only needed 4 clubs, because I hit what John Bryan calls all the irrelevant shots. I'd tee off and then hit the 5 wood, hit a lofty club, maybe putt, chip, and go to the next. So I never learned to hit a 7-iron off the ground. I never needed that shot until much later. So and then it was the psychological hurdle of trying to break 100 and then break 90 and then break 80, where for complete game development for a youth, get them started, and breaking 80 is no big deal once they get to a certain point. So we removed the psychological barrier of performance. So there's a lot of good positives to it, and the more coaches that do it, the more they're going to develop talent.
I agree 100%. So I'm going to come back to some talent that you had a chance to play with, and my Greg Norman story, which I love the fact. So I think you said it was 1993, and you're playing in the Australian Open at Royal was it Royal Melbourne, or where was it?
Well, it was the '84 Australian
84.
PGA Championship.
Oh, okay.
I got paired with him in the last round, and that was the year that the towel waving incident at Wingfoot, where Fuzzy and Greg were waving towels to each other. So that was in the summer, and so then in October I'm paired with Greg, and I went up to him in the locker room and said, "Well, Greg, I'm gonna putt out if I can." because everyone's rooting for you, and I don't want to get hung on a little short putt. And so I put it out on one of the holes early on the front nine, and he said, "Hey John, you're stepping in my through line." And I had to decide, well, God, this is my chance here. Maybe I'll challenge him. And I said, well, Greg, you tell me if you're going to miss it left or right, and I'll mark it. Big mistake. So he looked at me, and he goes up to the next hole, a par 5, and he smokes it down there, turns the corner perfectly, and then it's a 1-iron, it's a par 5, and then hits a 1-iron to about a foot, and then so for eagle, and then went birdie, birdie, birdie. So I should have just kept my mouth shut.
Yeah, you kind of poked the bear in that case, but I thought I remembered you said something to the fact that on that dog leg, you guys hit your drives, and you were a fader of the ball. You turned it over.
I did.
And your caddy kind of gave you the signal that you were the long man on that corner, and you walked up to the ball, and you guys, so you're standing there. And was Steve Williams your caddy at the time?
No, I had my buddy James Folk, his nickname's Twill. He was on the back. Steve caddied for me a couple of times when Greg didn't play, but so yeah, so I'm the long ball. That's why my story, fade it unless you have to turn it.
Right.
And I turned it down there, and so our third player, our partner had already hit down there, and so Greg and I are standing shoulder to shoulder, and he looks at me and he says, "Well, are you going to hit?" And I go, "Well, that's your ball, Greg. I'm the one further up." Oh gosh, that's when he just looked at me and it went over. He and Stevie, and he took that 1-iron and I thought he'd hold it.
Oh man, like that you just sit there and I can just imagine the steely cold stare that he's giving you at the time. Like, amazing you guys didn't start like going in the middle of the fairway of the Australian Open. It was like unbelievable, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
I mean, Norman just had this competitive spirit that was it was for real. If you've never looked at him square in the eyes, it's a different look. He's truly one of the greats in the Hall of Fame, and that's why he made it. The guy had serious game, and he was there to compete and to win.
That's amazing. You got to see that firsthand. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? And I mean, these stories are just fantastic. And I mean, you have given us such amazing nuggets over this hour of wonderful, wonderful stuff. And this is why I was so thankful that when you agreed to come on, because again, you're a great friend, great colleague, and just a wonderful compass for junior golf, because you really are a leader. You really show it when you get to talk about it, and it's just a joy to sit back and listen to some of these wonderful stories, my man. And I'm so thankful. I thank God that you are in my life in terms of like how you've helped me, and I know that I'm not the only one who talks about that. So we could probably talk for another hour, but I actually have to go. But I wanted to say thank you, John, for coming on today and sharing some of your great stories and great ideas and insights into junior golf and U.S. kids. And I hope you stay safe, and I see you this summer, hopefully at the Worlds.
Thank you, Doug. God bless.
You have a great day. Don't go away. I'm just going to kill these feeds.